Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us at the 2023 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. My name is Evan Lefkowitz. I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan, and it is my pleasure to introduce our panel, The Future of Sports and Entrepreneurship, a conversation with Jason Robins and Wyc Grousbeck. Our panelists today are Jason Robins, co-founder, CEO, and chairman of the board at DraftKings, and Wyc Grousbeck, lead owner for the Boston Celtics. Our panel will be moderated by Jessica Gelman, CEO of Kager. The panel will run for 45 minutes, and we will leave 10 minutes at the end for questions. Please submit your questions on Twitter using the hashtag Entrepreneurship in Sports. The moderator will then select the questions. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Wyc, Jason. Wonderful to be on stage with you. I also say this is like a very Boston-centric panel. Obviously, the Celtics are Boston Celtics and DraftKings here based, and then of course, I'm here in Boston too. So you guys are two of my favorite people. I love listening to you. I love learning from you. You're amazing entrepreneurs. So today we're gonna hit on like four main themes: building, and then extending what you are doing, big bets and analytics, leadership and managing in crisis, and future of sports. Now, if we don't hit all of those, that's because you guys are like having too much fun, which I think we all want, and that's fine too. So let's get started. Just at the kind of starting point here is what I've noticed about both of you is that you each seem to have a sense of opportunities before others do. So, Jason obviously starting with fantasy sports, and then some of the moves you made with gambling, and Wyc with how you created the syndicate for the Celtics, which was unusual at that time, and then how you were so focused on getting access to purchase the Celtics, and then the sports investment fund. I guess the question is, how did you originally conceive of the opportunities? I'll start with you, Jason. What did you see? What was the calculus you made, and why did you decide to go for it?
So like the original idea?
Yeah, the original concept.
I mean, I wish I had some like really amazing story where I had some great insight, but it wasn't actually me. It was my co-founder, Matt. We had been talking for a while about we'd like to start something together, and there were various points in time. I'd known him for years. And then similarly, I had conversations with Paul, who's my other co-founder. And when Matt knew that I was really into fantasy sports, he knew I was into all sorts of games. He and I were in fantasy leagues together, so he knew I had an interest in it. And one day he came to me and he basically described at a very high level the idea for daily fantasy sports. And I immediately was like, I'm not sure if this is just because I think I love this thing or if it's like a really good idea, but it just like, we had thrown around 100 ideas before, and this was like one that just like hit me like a ton of bricks. So just like, this is awesome. So I went home that night and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then the next day I came in and I'd already done a lot of research and looked and I found some competitors and other things, and I was just like hooked right away. So I think he came up with it. It immediately resonated with me. I still don't know if that's because I'm just a fantasy sports geek and I loved it, or if it's actually because I had some broader recognition that it was a good idea. But I was actually worried about that. I was like, do I think this is just a really good idea because I love it? So that was actually a little bit of a mental hurdle for me to get over. I thought I was biased, and then along the way, I think just everything sort of like naturally evolved in a way where I think we just didn't have a lot of choices. I'd like to say like I was so forward thinking, but for example, when we went to sports betting, it was kind of that or bust. We had just gone through an attempted merger with FanDuel that got shot down by the FTC. Company like needed a direction, and this was really like the Supreme Court announced they were taking up the case. That was really the only thing. So I think it got a lot harder later when we actually had real choices and options and had to make some more difficult decisions.
So just a follow-up question. You said, I like this, the mental hurdle and the bias. Was there anything that you kind of said, oh, I'm gonna like take it one step further to ensure that you weren't biased?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was research and just like doing more, what's the size of the fantasy sports market? How much revenue does it generate? So like getting convinced that it wasn't just me and my little bubble, that there was actually a real market out there. I think that's what helped me get over the hump.
Wyc.
Jess, can I say for the record, first of all, you both look fabulous in plum.
Thank you. We coordinated
Maroon,
today.
And I didn't get the memo. I think there's but that's okay. But secondly, you could answer every one of these questions. You founded a leading analytics company.
You knew he'd do.
You probably managed through crises. I don't know, but that was one of the questions. But you really ought to be interviewed instead of interviewing. But thank you for being.
I'm going to just pause right there. I think for those of you who don't know, the conference would not exist if you had not taken a shot on Daryl and brought him in and given him some of the opportunities on the team side doing analytics for the Celtics. And he and I met when he was at the Celtics. So
and I think I was like the first guest almost of the first Sloan, or one of the very early.
You were the keynote.
In front of or something like that. And Daryl said, Wyc, would you just please tell everybody how you really like to use analytics at the Celtics? And I actually said, I'm sorry, I don't really. I'm one of those people that looks at the players and sort of makes it. But I'm glad you know how to do analytics, Daryl. So I sort of started the whole entire conference off with I don't really use analytics. I've changed over the 20 years.
I mean, but I think that actually speaks to your leadership. And no, I do, because you empower people. But even like the way that you conceived of going about getting the Celtics. I mean, tell that story, because it's so.
Well, it is. I'm very respectful of how Jason and his co-founders did it, because they really thought it through. This was more intuitive and seat of the pants for me. Really was. That's no surprise to anybody that knows me. In college, I had been a college athlete, not recruited. I was a walk-on, but we had success there, and it formed my whole life, basically. That's what I learned in college. To the extent I learned anything was being on that team, rowing team. And so then fast forward 20 years, I'm at my desk investing at a venture capital firm and feeling that wasn't it at age 41. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I looked up at the wall, and there was a picture of us with the oars and a trophy, or actually with shirts over our shoulders, because you take the shirt off the back of the person that you vanquish if you happen to win. It's an amazing thing. And if you're wired like I am, that's an amazing thing. You might think it's not amazing, but competitors think it's amazing. And I'm like, I want to do that again. I want to go win a championship. And the only way to do that was for me, that I could think of, was to buy a Boston sports team. And I didn't have the money, but I went and found, the Celtics were publicly traded. They were on the New York Stock Exchange. So I looked up the numbers. I saw they were cash positive, which I couldn't really believe. I didn't think that existed in pro sports, and especially in 2002. And I thought, well, if there's this cash flow, how much could I borrow against that and pay the interest and have left over to invest in the team and make them better? Because it was half full. The arena was half full, half empty.
Wow.
Actually about 11,000 people in there in the garden, in the new garden, out of 18.6. And so just empty seats everywhere. And I'm thinking, how do this wasn't about making money. I wasn't made of money, still not. That's not the point. For me, in this case, the point was for love, for passion, and so I looked at the numbers of the Celtics for 10 minutes. I'm like, I think I could support a price of like 360 if I can raise 180 or 200 of equity around Boston and borrow 180. I could support 360. And then I went and found the guy in New York, a very nice guy, made an appointment on East 63rd Street. You have to go East 63rd Street to find the owner of the Celtics. And it had been actually owned out of town since 1963. For 40 years, 39 years, the Celtics had been owned elsewhere by 10 or 12 different owners. And he said, what are you doing here? And I said, I'd like to buy the Celtics. And he said, they're not for sale. And I said, well, is there a crazy number? And this is the turning point of my whole life. He said, there's a crazy number, probably, I guess, 360. It was absolutely the top of the range that I had sort of calculated. And so this is my negotiating style. At this case, I said, okay, if I give you 360 in 3 months, will you sell me the Celtics? And he's like, I guess so. And we shook hands, and I went home and mortgaged my house and wired him a non-refundable deposit. This is back in the days when you could mortgage your house to buy an NBA team. And it wasn't that great a house either. I also mortgaged my vacation house, which is a little better. That's the one Obama has now on the Vineyard. But that also had a mortgage on it now, and I wired that money down, and I went out and I had to find 22 great partners around Boston. And the pitch to them was not, we're going to make money. It was, I don't think we're going to go broke, but we're going to be paid in enjoyment. We're going to have the time of our lives. So that's maybe a whole nother topic. But the whole currency of the Celtics from the beginning in the DNA was Celtic pride, not IRR. I promise, it's just the truth.
It's actually interesting. I hadn't really thought about this until you said it, but in 2003, 2004, and I was, with the Patriots and with the Crafts, and they were having a lot of success and were sold out. And we were talking about starting to collect customer data. It was the early days, and the actual example of why it made sense when I was talking with Jonathan was very specifically, look at the Celtics. They're this amazing history, and they don't know their customer. I mean, it was again very early days. Facebook didn't exist, and look at them. They're struggling because they don't know their fans. Let's do it. So I mean, and you had already had.
I walked in there, and it was file folders, no computers whatsoever. File folders of season ticket holders, and with a lot of sticky notes that say these are free because this cop didn't give Red Auerbach a speeding ticket. I mean, it goes back 30 years, and it's a big mess, and there are handfuls of tickets lying around, and we sold tickets in August, and by definition, that's Red Sox time around Boston, or it's the Cape and the Vineyard and Nantucket time, or New Hampshire for a lot of people, but it's definitely not basketball season in August. And so we started, the first thing I did is we said we're going to sell our season ticket renewals in February, and we're going to offer free playoff tickets to people who renew. Well, the first thing I did is I wrote a personal thank you letter to every season ticket holder, which wasn't that hard. There weren't that many, but they had never been thanked really that way. There's so many things, but we don't do things perfectly now, but we did have to change a bunch of stuff.
I mean, but what resonates from what both of you just said was, first you both talked about the teams that you were part of, and that's but also that you had a belief that there was something there and you wanted to go after it. So thank you for that. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about the building and extending. Jason, you alluded to this a little bit, but as you know, I've called you in the course of the growth of Kager for advice and counsel, and I think one of your best skills is your forward thinking about partnerships. And in fact, in 2013, you became the first daily fantasy company to sign a league partnership with Major League Baseball. You obviously went public via SPAC in 2019. How else did you think about differentiating DraftKings early in your evolution?
Well, I think even though a lot of what got more attention were deals and fundraising, and those were all important, I think looking at it now, probably the most important thing we did was from day one put a really heavy emphasis on product. That was really the core of everything, that we thought best product wins. And I think that's continued on into the other things like online sports betting that we've launched. That meant we had to build a great technology team, great engineering team. So that was also a really important part of the investment. And then lastly, analytics. That was my background. I had started my career as an analyst. So did my two co-founders. Both of them, actually, Paul technically tried to be an engineer for about a year, but quickly figured out he wasn't good enough. So even though he coded the original DraftKings website and we gave him a hard time, the whole thing had to be rebuilt about a year later. But he got it off the ground, so that was good. And now he oversees our whole product engineering team. But we all came from an analytics background too, so that was also core. It was all right, this, it's a very complicated business, but if you take a step back, it's actually, product, technology, analytics, that all powers, decision making and also obviously marketing as well. And that was very obvious, I think, early on to us that those are the places, and there was really no debate about it. I mean, there were a lot of debates along the way, but as far as what's the core, skill set that needs to be built to win in this space, it was very obvious to us.
Yeah. So again, DraftKings is 10 years old.
Just turned almost 11, yeah.
But I think in your second year, you gave a presentation, a competitive advantage talk here at Sloan as you guys were starting to. So, I mean, you've come a long way.
We had to beg to get on stage, but it worked.
You didn't have to beg.
You're like, who is this guy? I can't believe, all right, fine, Jonathan's asking, I guess I'll do it.
But I think in terms of differentiation, Wyc, I mean, obviously we already mentioned that you were an early adopter of analytics on the basketball side. Why did you gravitate towards this approach? Was there something that you were seeing when you were at Highland Capital that was like, hey, this is something that's gonna, make it?
No, I had to learn it, and I learned it from Daryl. I hesitate to admit, but it's true. Learned it from Daryl and from watching Danny Ainge interact with Daryl, which was always funny. It's like a sitcom or something. It's like, the way they, and then our coach, with Doc, the whole thing. Just because Doc and Danny and I think, are people that are a little more like the old school, like the baseball scouts in Moneyball. And Daryl's like, no. The game's very simple. It's baskets and free throws and shooting percentage. And I'm like, Daryl, you're basically saying it's the score. I got it. Those are the scoring plays. But I mean, but we had healthy debates, but I came along on the journey and I see the point. And so now we have, but I just kind of vetoed a trade the other day on the trading deadline because, the numbers added up. 3.7 was going out and 3.9 was coming back in our proprietary rating system. We thought we were getting a 0.2 edge, except it was for a future season. And I'm like, I just told everybody it's this season. So that's not analytical. It's me saying it's this season. I don't know what's going to happen this summer with our roster or anything else. I know we have a chance this year. So everything's coming. Future 3.9 has no value to me. And so I make that call. That's not analytical.
How absolute is that? If it were a bigger gap, would you have maybe made a different decision?
I've been in 20 years. I have only one ring. Better than none, but I want another one.
All right, so
that's
going for it.
That's that.
Well, Daryl will often say that the brain is the best analytic tool. And so I think like the decisioning, earlier there was a panel on the impact of Moneyball, 20 years. And one of the questions was like, can you quantify team? And at this point in time, the answer is no. Bill James actually said you need to have cameras in all of the different rooms to watch people. But I think, again, both of you, but both
dystopian, I think.
Yes, exactly. But again, kind of the first commentary that both of you made was about like team. Like you both talked about the team, and so I mean, I am also a art and science of the qualitative and quantitative part, and that team. So I would trust your gut on team on decisioning. So we'll see how the season goes.
Thanks. Well, based on last night, we should have probably made the trade. At least I showed up. I was going to hide under the covers all day.
So. Okay, so each of you then extended various elements after you got into sports and into new areas. And how did you think about the adjacency and the best way to scale? So, Wyc, you created Causeway. So, how did you think about that? And then Jason will come to you with gambling.
So I did organize my group around the Celtics around the principle of we're going to have the time of our lives. On and off the court, we get to do these amazing things with this thing that's much bigger than we are. So, and I think we're going to not go broke. We may not appreciate, but that's not the point. It's the last Boston team that's going to sell in our lifetimes. So that was for love.
Yeah.
Having said that, being in there 3, 4, 5 years, and then having the good luck of having some good teams then, but I also saw the digitization, the digital expansion of our media rights, of our connection with fans. And I felt like there's so many legacy businesses in sports that are, I just felt like I could see ahead a little bit, the Wall Street Journal a little bit ahead, which is not always my, but in this case, it's like, all right, I got to actually put money to work as a job to invest in the knowledge or the belief that media rights were going to go digital and go global, and sports was going to change. The technology and sports intersection was going to be a great place to invest. So I did Causeway with 2 great partners. We've been investing together since the 90s. It's been a 30-year run, great people, and we just put money behind the profit. So we have companies like SeatGeek and Quint Events and Flow Sports and Zwift.
Yeah.
And these are really exciting companies.
So in terms of those investments, maybe just what are some of the key features that you look for beyond digitization as you're thinking about growth?
When we invest, and there's no correct way to do it, it's been going well for us, but there are many people that do great doing it other ways. But we start with the CEO, and we just try to really have that interpersonal. So again, maybe it isn't analytics. I mean, I'm not.
No wonder you didn't invest in me ever.
Yeah, no, I would invest in you anytime. I think that was public, I think it was a pipe, and we've never done pipes, but that's the escape valve in that one. But should have invested in you. But CEO first and foremost, and then figure out if that person has a team and a plan. And we like to see 5 to 10 to 15 million of revenue, so it's already off the ground. In which case we can try to use our network in sports, because Mark Wan, one of my partners, is also an owner not only of the Celtics but of the Niners, a limited partner, and we have great partnerships with NFL and basketball and baseball owners as LPs of our fund. So we have those connections. We like to apply those not to raw startups, but to people that are already moving down the track.
So similar question for you on the adjacency and the best way to scale. I mean, you kind of said earlier, it's a no-brainer to go into gambling.
I mean, it's interesting to hear Wyc talk about it, because I look at the businesses he started, and they don't always feel like adjacencies, like tequila, sitcoms. But it resonated what he was saying, that it came from the opportunities created and the networking and all that originated with his whole group he put together, and the notion of owning the Celtics. I think for us, it was much more, we had a central sort of theme to the business, which is we had a platform, we had customers, digital platform with customers, we had wallets, we had people who had their payment methods linked, and we had a certain type of brand and engagement. And so, sports betting and then other forms of online gaming were just a very obvious adjacency. I think as we've started to try other things, it's been a little trickier, and some of them I think are going well, but haven't been as obvious and as easy to get off the ground. But the kind of sports betting, iGaming stuff, it was very obvious, I think, to anyone. I didn't have to go in and pitch investors. They knew what I was talking about, because of course you're going to go into sports betting now that sports betting is legal. So I think for a lot of it, it was just execution, really. And on the scaling side, it's all about the people. I mean, people are what give you scale. If you have people that can run things and can either with limited or sometimes very close to no oversight, be able to manage things in a way that is effective and collaborate with other members of your team, that's how you get scale. Our most scarce thing is our time. And being able to get more things done with the same amount of time, because we can't create more time in the day, really means you have to have other people that are thinking about things and doing things that you don't have to put that same mental energy and effort into all day.
Is there a particular hire that you're like, this was the one that really gave us leverage? I mean, it could be at any point.
I mean, I can't say it's one. There are a lot of people I could name. Starts with my co-founders, but there's easily like a dozen or more others that are just critical people, many of which have been with us for 8, 9, 10 years. The other really interesting thing is, and it's really, I think, impossible to replicate, and so we've worked so hard to try to preserve that initial group. People who've been part of the build process, who were there when it was smaller, who've gone through all the ups and downs. It's almost like a founder mentality. It's their baby too. They feel the same way that the founders do in many ways, and you can't replicate that no matter what you pay somebody or no matter what their wiring is coming in. And I hear that probably when he's talking about his initial group, like that mentality and the experiences that they went through in the beginning, you just can't replicate that if you bring in some other owner later, I would think.
Right. So I was like raising my hand because I would love to hear, I think we probably all would love to hear what you can share, but it sounds like, well, we had this, I've always loved fantasy and amazing co-founders, and they had this great idea we all generated, but you had legal challenges, you had like criminal potential, involvement or whatever, like, civil at least, if not worse, and you got through that with resolve and fortitude and probably being worried along the way. But it feels a little seamless to roll, and you weren't glossing over it, you just didn't mention, but people probably like to know how bad it really felt. I feel terrible when we lose a game. This has got to be like times 1,000 facing, like attorneys general across the country.
It's similar to kind of where I was describing sports betting earlier. There was this whole period of time, and it was really almost from the beginning all the way through until about 2 years ago, where I felt like our back is against the wall, and just like any, if you're in the ring, your back's against the wall, there's only one way to go. And doesn't mean you're going to be successful doing it, but you don't have a lot of options. And the ability to get over that mental hurdle of, oh man, this is terrible, and just say like, look, if I'm going to give us any chance to get to that next step, to survive, to advance, I got to do this, and we got to do this. And I think that there was like a remarkable simplicity to it, and where I feel like, if there's any credit to be given to the team, it's the fact that we were able to just focus on those things and compartmentalize, and the fact that so many other people were able to be shielded from it and could continue to build the business. That was actually something Jonathan Kraft said to me. I called him up when we were at like the absolute darkest moment. The first thing I said to him is, I said, what do you think the chances of survival are? And he goes, 50-50. And I knew he was telling me 50-50 is probably like 5% in his mind. He's not going to tell me that. And then I said, you got any advice for me? And everybody, I had 1,000 lawyers coming at me at the time, had advice on do this, legally, politically, whatever. And he said, make sure like you, and if you need to, a small group of your people are focusing on this stuff, and then you've carved out as much of the rest of your leadership to just focus on product and on operations and on advancing the business, because your competitors are going through, really our competitor at the time, are going through the same thing. And that actually creates an opportunity for you. Sure, you have to get out to the other side, but that's either going to happen or not. What you need to do is make sure if you get to the other side that the rest of your team has been able to advance enough so you're actually ahead of the game when that happens. And you do that by really, compartmentalizing, by making sure that you have a small group that's focused on this and the other people are focused on building products and so on and so forth. So that was like a really game-changing moment for me, where like it's sort of like maybe intuitively I knew what we had to do, but then I knew like, okay, not only do I have to do this, but I have to do this, and maybe I had a few other people with me, but like I have to kind of shield everybody else from this, and I have to absorb all of that stress, and I actually have to make it seem like it's probably better than it is, because that'll distract, if I don't, other people from being able to focus on things.
Leadership lessons in here that I'm...
It was a little scary though to not just go through it, but also to feel like, hey, all these people around me don't actually know how bad it really is. And I'm sitting here and in our little bubble, and like a few of us knew. But everybody else is like, they read the headlines, stuff like that, but they don't really know how bad it really is. So that was a little scary too, but I'm sure you've been through those moments, maybe not in literally the same thing, but I'm sure you've been through many moments where you felt like things...
I've never been charged criminally with anything. So.
I haven't either.
Okay, good.
Well, I think that's a great example of like weathering a very challenging time. I'm also just interested generally, like, is there an example of a misstep that you've taken over the past 10 years? And, what is the most important lesson that you learned from that?
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
You give me the hard
all
ones. Why don't you take this one?
Okay. Well, I was just with Kendrick Perkins the other day at his book signing, and he's one of my most beloved friends. I just, bonded for life, love Perk, and he wrote a really amazing book, The Education of Kendrick Perkins. But I said in front of a bunch of people that one of the biggest mistakes was trading him, agreeing to trade him. That seems very minor. You're looking for bigger things like that, but it really actually hurt the team, I think, hurt me personally. He did great out in Oklahoma. He was fine with it, but it was, he says in his book, he sat there and was sobbing with Kevin Garnett when it happened, or with Al Jefferson when it happened, or somebody. And that's the first example that came to mind. I've made, no doubt, many missteps, but and I know I have, but.
What did you change in your mind as a result of that? Once you're like, oh,
I probably got a little more rigid about saying, no, we're not going to, trade for 2 years from now.
Including this most recent one at the trade deadline.
Probably a little, and that's not necessarily to the good. To close my ears as opposed to keeping them open is not a good thing. So I'm just sort of confessing it.
I guess we'll find out in a few months.
We'll find out. We found out.
Jason, you want to come back to this one, or?
My biggest misstep was I should have bought those Celtics tickets a few years ago when they were a little cheaper. No, I think really...
For the record, we price Celtic tickets at like 15% below the street price on SeatGeek or Ticketmaster, so we don't want people to feel like they can't actually be okay if they don't want to attend all the games.
That is true. And
but your point is well taken.
Yeah, it was good. It was definitely missed timing on my part. But there's so many. It's almost hard to say. I mean, I could think of things in the last week, the last day that are missteps. I think a good recent example is we totally screwed up how we presented our quarter in November, and we learned from it and fixed it in February and had completely opposite result. And it's not to say when I say presented our quarter, like we don't actually manage the business saying, oh my God, quarter to quarter the way, like I think it's a dangerous trap to fall in as a public company. Of course you have to make sure that you're managing it though. And part of that means whatever you're going out on your earnings day with, regardless of like whether you made a single decision and hopefully you didn't really, with that quarterly earnings in mind, you still have the material you have, and it's your best job. You got to do the best job you can to present it and explain it to the street. And I think really, it was interesting. We were just I was talking about this with my CFO the other day. You know, literally the same investors in a bull market a year and a half ago wanted to hear this, and now the same people want to hear a completely different thing. Mm-hmm. And as obvious as it may seem, looking outside, like that's a little bit of a mental shift when you're like, I'm talking to these same people, and like suddenly everything I was telling them that they were so excited about before, they're like, I hate that, I want to hear the opposite. And so, you know, I was like, we were looking at like, what have other CEOs, other tech companies done? And I looked at the pivot Zuckerberg with Facebook was able, like they got killed. I mean, they had days they were trading off 20+%, and then all of a sudden changed his message from metaverse to efficiency, and the market loved it. And it occurred to me, like, he's actually never been through a bear market either. We've been on such a long bull run that Facebook, who'd been public for like 10 years or something at that point, had never actually been through a bear market. So it was a shift for everybody. The last real bear market, I was 27 years old when it happened. So. And I certainly wasn't thinking about this kind of stuff. I was, you know, a few years out of college working, you know, in a mid-level corporate job. So it's just kind of interesting. But the most important thing, whatever misstep you make, is to learn. Otherwise, it's a waste. If you make a mistake, you better learn from it.
Are there some shifts that you feel like you've made to your I know there's shifts that you've made to your leadership style over the course of you know, the past 11 years, but also like during this kind of situation that's happening in the market right now?
Not really. I mean, I think that because we'd been through difficult times before, as Wyc so eloquently detailed, it was very, like a lot of companies when they first face scrutiny is when they're a public company for the first time. And we've been through it. We've been beaten up. So I used to joke with people, be like, this is easy. I mean, this is like, you know, this is the most comfortable I've ever felt since starting the business. And meaning I actually felt more uncomfortable when the market was roaring and I was just like, oh man, something bad's gonna happen. I'm just so used to like nothing goes well for too long. But I think that's when the company's done its best. So we really just recalled everything we've been through and said like, hey, we've like, on way worse circumstances, risen to the challenge, shown that we can absolutely, you know, defy the odds. And like nothing has felt more gratifying than when people are doubting you to come back and just show them they were all wrong. I have like a sick brain. I get more pleasure out of that than like celebrating success. I love proving people wrong. It just, for whatever reason.
That's why I asked about it, because I wanted people to hear how strong you are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've successfully got me doing the talking. I like it, Wyc. Why don't we hear about how Wyc went from venture capital to the Celtics team to tequila to now a Hollywood sitcom star?
I mean, I do actually. You talked about your digitization.
That's a true renaissance.
Yeah, no, digitization of sports, and then at some point you're like, okay, now I'm going to start a tequila company with a bunch of other owners, and I'm going to write a sitcom. Like, what, like.
What's the matter with
the natural career path of most of us?
No, not what's the matter with you.
I'm just trying to have fun. I'm trying to enjoy myself. But yeah, the sitcom came out of my wife and her ex had this very amicable divorce, and so much so that they share a nest on the Upper East Side, and the kids stay put in their bedrooms, and mom has a little place over here, and dad has a little place over here, and people switch in and out, and it's very fun. It's called nesting, and it's a popular thing. If you can work it out after a divorce, it seems to be really good for the kids. That's all well and good until the guy who grew up in Needham and went to BC, and is the biggest Boston sports fan on the planet, and one day came home with a share of Celtics stock when they were public, and said, we're owners of the Celtics. And then I said, this is a sitcom, because then I showed up and He's like, what's wrong with Jim Dolan or Mark Cuban? Boston sports is all I have. You cannot marry this guy. And so that turned in, I said, this is a sitcom. We're all in one living room. And so I wrote a treatment, and we sold it to NBC, and we're producing 13 episodes right now. It's on right after Night Court this fall at 8:30 on Thursdays.
That's awesome.
If we get the 13 episodes done. There's a writer's strike coming.
Oh.
So it might be a delay, but we'll see.
God, we got some.
Did you win him over the same way Red Auerbach got out of that ticket?
That's right. No, listen, I'm learning the Hollywood business, and it's not free tickets. It's like, it's worse.
Different sort. It's worse.
Yeah. But just so you know, who's cast as the Celtics owner, we are using the Celtics marks. It's but a different name. As I said to Amelia, my wife, this is imaginary people doing ridiculous stuff. This is not a documentary about us. But the Celtics owner is being played by Donald Faison, who was Turk on Scrubs. So anybody knows Donald Faison from Scrubs. Finally, we have some diversity at the ownership position of the Celtics, but he's hilarious.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. And I think actually the consistent theme is it's something deeply personal to you. So that's connectivity. Okay.
Just like tequila.
Yeah, just like tequila. So, obviously here in Massachusetts, gambling is going to be legal on March 10th. And so I'm actually going to start with Wyc on this one. How is sports betting, in your opinion, going to impact the fan experience? And how will it change for those who are not into gambling? And then, I'll let you provide.
Yeah, we have the expert here, but I was thinking about this earlier today, wondering if we talk about that. And I feel like I have so much invested. I can't gamble on the games, but I feel like I am, because I have so much invested in it. It's personal pride, and it's, and it's all that. But I think we all feel connected. Those of us who love sports feel connected. You go over to Siena, Italy, and you see the neighborhoods, and they each have their horse in the palio, and it's been going on since the 1200s or 1300s. And all the neighboring towns, which is not very well known, have their own palios. One I saw has donkeys running up a hill. I mean, it's not just the one in Siena. There's like 50 of them in that region because the neighborhoods just want to compete with one another. So it's sort of a human nature thing. I don't like to play golf unless it's like for $1. I don't care. It doesn't have to be for $100, but it's just more fun. So I think it's going to enhance, for a lot of fans who may have the same leanings, it's really going to enhance the viewership, enhance their engagement. They can watch games that is not the hometown team. I think it's really, I was going to say brilliant, and it's really going to be positive for the ecosystem as long as we don't have problem gambling and all the things that Jason worries about all day long.
Do you have like a specific concept of how you might think about integrating it for the in-game experience?
There are people doing that. I'm going to yield to my friend to my left, but I'm anxious to see how it works out. I'm going to try to find some basketball players, But.
So, Jason, how do you envision gambling enhancing the fan experience?
I mean, Wyc really touched on a lot of it, and I'll take what he said and build on it because I think it's the important. It was at least for me. Thinking of it in the way of not just I'm going to create a new fan, but deepening engagement was what resonated. So, Wyc talked about you're a Celtics fan. You're a Celtics owner. You are very invested in the Celtics winning. You care. That is the fundamental reason that most of us are following or watching a sport. Now, yeah, we want to see great athletic accomplishments and we want to see, cool things we've never seen before, and that's all part of it. But we have some rooting interest, some vested interest. And what betting does, or what fantasy does, is it just puts that in, expands it well beyond what just that hometown, fan of the team is experiencing. So all of a sudden, I have a vested interest in every game. If I'm betting on every NBA game tonight, maybe I don't care as much as a fan, but I do care, and I'm experiencing a lot of the same things that made me excited to watch the Celtics in the first place. Same thing if I'm betting on the team I like. All of a sudden, do I care if they win one of many regular season games? I care, but this one means even more because I got a few dollars riding on it. And so it just takes whatever you were naturally as a fan inclined to enjoy about the sport, and it gives you more of a rooting interest or a more diverse set of rooting interests in other games. And I've talked to people that's happened across sports. Adam Schefter loves to tell me that he was not super into the NBA until he started playing the $3 fantasy NBA games on DraftKings, and he only really got into them because he's playing the football games and on the off days when it was not Sunday, Monday, Thursday, or he's like, all right, I'll try a few of these, and now he loves it. And that got him, but he was already obviously naturally inclined to those things. He wanted to, care about the game. He wanted to research it. He wanted to follow it. So I think it really it's not going to invent new sports fans per se, but it will take sports fans that are casual and turn them into mega fans. It'll take mega fans of a particular team and turn them into knowledgeable about every player, every team in the league. And I think it creates this unbelievably virtuous, flywheel type effect with the content that does create these amazing opportunities to partner together. Even in strange ways, like we've done stuff with Wyc's Tequila Company, and that we've given away custom bottles for our VIPs, and so they love it. So there's just this amazing relationship, I think, between people who are betting and are playing fantasy, and the content itself that just keeps growing the better we do our job. And what I love about that is it gives people like Wyc and the leagues a vested interest in seeing us do it the right way, but seeing us be successful because they know it's engaging their fans. And I really think that's the core of what they care about. It's, obviously there's money-making opportunities too, but every time I talk to anyone at the NBA or I talk to Wyc, I hear, or any of the leagues for that matter, it's all about fan engagement.
So maybe you can just say, on March 10th, or soon thereafter, what will the fan experience be like that in terms of interacting and engaging? And then how is it going to evolve in your mind over the next couple of years, the actual experience of gambling during the game? I think you have a vision, so it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think to start, it's really, March 10th, there's an existing market that is already here now. March 10th is not the first day that most people who are going to bet on March 10th will bet. Most people who are going to bet on March 10th have probably been betting either illegally or in Vegas or somewhere else for a while. So a lot of it is about, in the very beginning phases, how do we take some of the potential downsides that exist in the illegal market, like no protections for responsible gaming, no protections for making sure people can actually get their money off the system and on the system, making sure that if there's any integrity issues that they're swiftly reported to the appropriate folks, all that sort of stuff. Making sure that we're trying to take as much in the illegal market where that doesn't exist and bring as much of that volume here in the legal market. And that's really a lot of how we're thinking about the first phase. Doesn't mean there won't be innovation, but that is a core focus. Is there's a huge already built up audience of people that are doing this in an illegal market. Let's bring them over to the legal market. And to do that, we have to make sure that those benefits are really well executed. If it's a pain to get your money on and off the system, and believe me, all the different ways that between regulations and payment processors, they try to make it difficult, which, by the way, we always get blamed for. I love how many people are like, why do you keep logging me out of the Sportsbook app every 15 minutes? Like, regulatory requirement, but nobody knows that. They think it's just us with buggy technology or doing something we shouldn't be doing. But our job, I think, is to say, okay, like we have to go up against a lot of these offshore companies that don't have to comply with those things. How do we still make sure it's a better experience? Because we do have some advantages. Banks are willing to work with us because we're not offshore and operating illegally, things like that. So that's a lot of the initial thing. And then I think as far as where it goes, I'm really not big on predicting this long-term vision. I really think that there's so many things, especially with technology where it is now, there are so many things that are going to happen over the coming years that we don't even know about that are going to bring new ideas that I'm not like, here's where we're going to be in 5 years. High level, is it going to be more integrated into the sport? I think so. Is it going to be even more interactive than it is today? I think so. How will all that kind of come about? Very hard to say. And I use this as an example. When we first started, we launched a website. And at the time, I think there had been the iPhone had been around for maybe 3 or 4 years, something like that. So it was around for a decent enough time, but we still had 95+% of our traffic coming on web. And then the next year I looked at data, it's 15% is coming on mobile. And at that point in time, I said, all right, we're gonna stop focusing solely on the website and we're gonna build a mobile app. Like, what are you doing? It's only 15% of traffic. It's like, yeah, but it was 5% last year. And everybody's like, okay, fine, I guess that makes sense. But if it gets to 20, 30%, we should probably have a separate mobile app. Now it's 95% the other way. And so I think what we've gotten good at is more being on top of technology and where it's going, recognizing trends, and being able to figure out how those trends apply to our business a little bit faster than some of our competition. Even though we were not the first to launch a website, we were the first with a smartphone app, we were the first with an Apple TV app, all that sort of stuff. And it's because we were looking at data and we're paying attention and recognizing trends. So that's the real thing. It's very hard to, replicate, vision or good guessing. So we tried to build a muscle of how do we just have people that are always, and as I get older, I'm naturally less and less that way. Like I don't naturally come across new technologies as often as I used to 10, 15 years ago. Hopefully as my kids get a little older, they'll fill that gap for me, but not yet. So, really building a team and a culture where that's core, and like people are like, yeah, like I want to hear about it. I remember a previous company I was at, was like, yeah, we're not going to do mobile until it's like, 70, 80%. I mean, it's not interesting to us. And like, we actually try to go the opposite and say, I want people pushing me to do it before we're ready. I want to have that debate where somebody's like, it's 15% and the other person's like, nope, this is happening. And the more we build the culture that way and the more those new ideas get surfaced, I think that's really the repeatable thing. Being, reliant on any individual or even small group of people to know where things are going, I don't think works long term.
Yeah. So, as we're thinking about the future of sports, obviously this is a big part of it. Wyc, what do you see as the next big thing in sports? And from a macro trends perspective, what are the tailwinds or headwinds to this?
Well, the next big thing, I think that I think it's going to be, I was a history major, maybe it's going to show that bias. Definitely not an engineer because didn't have the chops, but I think the great teams are going to continue to, be strong because I think the world's going to. There's room for new sports. There are new sports coming, padel and pickleball, and 2020, cricket obviously a huge success and all of that. So there's room, but I just think of these local teams like the Celtics were probably a 75-mile radius team back in the day, like
Not anymore.
TV signal 75 miles, driving into a game 75 miles maybe tops, and not selling out in the 60s. They won 11 championships in 13 years through that period, and I'm told that many of those games didn't sell out.
Wow.
So it was just very local, and now it's global, like the Patriots and so many others. And so I guess it's not the next big thing, but it's continuing the trend. I'm like, if you said, would global appeal of legacy teams double or drop 50%, I'm going to be on the optimistic side.
With
I don't know if we can double from here, but if I had to choose one or the other, I'd say double from here.
With that in mind, as it moves away from purely local and now with like the struggles of the RSNs, where do you think all that's going to go?
Yeah, I think the RSNs are a great legacy that my father, who was early in cable in 1963, probably helped. I don't think he'd say he helped invent the bundle, but we've certainly benefited as a family from the bundle for around 70 years now, or whatever the math is. Well, let's see, 63, that would be, 60 years. And, but I think it's like an oil well now, and we're pumping steam down there to try to get the last drops of oil out. But it's going digital. The bundle is legacy and a la carte, or,
How are the Celtics approaching that?
We have a long-term partnership still with Comcast, with NBC Sports Boston, and that partnership is very strong because the fan support has been very strong. We have great ratings and great fan support around New England. So we've got a number of years to run on that, and I think the New England cable model is pretty good, but eventually we'll transition, I imagine.
You're going to keep pumping the steam in as long as you can.
Pump that steam in, or ask Brian Roberts to do it.
Jason, what about you on the next big thing?
I think really, it's going to be technology driven, and the thing that we're seeing is technology is enabling more connections between the fan and the team or the player than ever before. We're also seeing technology is allowing the players to establish their own brands and their own identities independent of needing to attach to some bigger brand or identity as much. So I think those are two real trends that we're seeing that will change things. In particular, I think on the latter side, you didn't see, I mean, Jordan, obviously there were examples of like these mega brands, but it wasn't as common to see somebody say, hey, I'm like starting my own, shoe, or I'm starting my, like 20, 30 years ago. And now that can be expanded into anything. I think what technology has done is reduce the sort of friction for somebody without having to get involved with a larger company or a larger brand to be able to do some of the things that connect them with fans and build up their followings and build up their brands. And I think you're going to see even more of that occurring, and it's going to become it's already, in the NBA in particular, a very player-centric league, but I think it becomes even more that way.
So, Wyc, you mentioned that you're like going for the championship this year. As you're thinking about championships and the vision for the Celtics, would you care to elaborate a little bit more? For this year, what are like championship means?
She wants to know if you're going to win a championship.
No. I meant like your definition of winning.
Oh, this is my definition of winning. Right there. I'd like to get another one.
Thank you for letting my son take a photo with that in the green room.
For any Knicks fans in the audience, this is a championship ring.
Oh.
Next question.
No, but I think like your definition of
you got to have fun with your job.
Yeah.
If you don't have, can I just close on this note? I think we have, in a moment, try to have fun. I've been very, very lucky to be here. Clearly, lucky background, privileged, all the things that I probably should have noted more carefully, but I'm trying to note now. But whatever you're doing, try to find something that you enjoy that doesn't feel like work. And then I'd also like to say, and you didn't ask, but I do want to hang another banner or two. It does happen though that it's not necessarily basketball. My son is blind, as an example, Campbell. I was the chairman of Mass Eye for 11 years, but I'd like to hang a banner that says we beat blindness. Like there's no more blindness in the world. So we can all hang banners. It's not all about the ring or the ones that are hanging in the garden. So you can each hang a banner in this room with your talents and skills that you have out there in the darkness. But maybe take a moment, think of the banner you want to hang in your life, and let me know when the celebration is, and I'll come and try to celebrate with you.
I love that. Jason, do you have a banner outside of the success of DraftKings?
I think we all want to make an impact on the world in some way, and I think Wyc, given his child has a passion for blindness, there's a lot of areas that we focus on at DraftKings. Many of them are things that are personal to us. Some of them are things that are important to our players. Veterans is a big one for us. Diversity is a big one for us. Social justice, those sorts of things. I think that having a purpose beyond whatever your business's purpose or your whatever your job's purpose is something that most people need, and to be able to do that in a bigger way is a blessing. The other thing I would add is we've told us both talk about people that we worked with. Having great people around you is important, and part of that is and it's not just, I think I'll compliment Wyc for a second, not just like something that you act and do, but like actually being humble. Wyc is an incredibly humble person. You heard him talk earlier about, hey, analytics maybe at first wasn't my thing, but I knew Daryl, other people, smart people around me no, this is something you got to pay attention to. And you see it in his personality and the way he presents himself, but it's also, I would imagine, in the way that he runs his organization. People are comfortable speaking up. People are comfortable pushing back. No pride of authorship. And I think, again, to get scale, you need to get great people around you, you need to get great ideas coming from everywhere, and getting over that like mental hurdle of, hey, I need things to come from me, or I have to give up control, or whatever like thing is holding you back from doing that, I think is an important step for anybody. And some people it'll come naturally too, right? I don't think, Wyc has to work that hard at it, but for others, it might be a little bit of, a journey to get there. But it really does come down to creating, having great people around you and creating an environment where everyone feels comfortable. Part of it is having fun, and everyone feels like, they're not operating out of fear. Maybe they're a little bit, nervous about their own results, but it's coming from themselves, not from you. And there's an environment where all sorts of folks, that's why we emphasize diversity so much, feel comfortable sharing ideas, pushing back, We love a good debate at DraftKings, even if it makes it take a little longer, and I do get complaints about that. We don't shut it down, because good quality comes from that. And I think that it's important you create an environment where people can express their views, even if they know that someone else disagrees with them.
Just quick question, how humble can you be if you write a TV show about yourself?
Very aware, very aware. No, I would agree over the almost 20 years that I've known you, Wyc. You are incredibly
Thank you.
humble. No, it's just true.
Thank you.
He doesn't even want to be
Time's
called
up.
humble. He's so
Time's
humble.
up.
Yeah.
Yep. No.
That's
All
how
right,
humble.
so we have a couple minutes for questions from the audience. So if anything is a little too sticky, I'm sorry, it wasn't me. What?
Wyc's already asked me the toughest question.
Yeah, really.
I was trying to give you a compliment by bringing up that horrible,
I love it.
You guys are
that
moderating
horrible,
each other.
in time period. Yeah.
So this first one, Jason, is for you. I think it's, what do you think of the new wave of competitors in sports gambling? What would you do differently if you were starting from scratch today?
So two different questions. I'll start with the first one. We're in a very competitive industry, and I think it's interesting. Daily fantasy, even though it didn't end up being nearly as large as online sports betting will be, it was kind of a similar thing where there was a period where it felt like every week there's a new competitor launching, and it was almost like you had to stop yourself from being dismissive. Even if naturally you're like, really? Like USA Today is going to launch a daily fantasy sports website? Okay. You're like, nope, I don't, because I thought about it and I'm like, we were one of others, and FanDuel, I think when we ended up passing them in daily fantasy, one of the things we look back on is they didn't take us seriously enough in the beginning. So we really preach, like, every competitor you have to take seriously. You have to assume every single competitor is here to win, and have a healthy worry about it. Don't ever get complacent. The worst thing you could do is to get complacent. So I think that's something we've been used to for a long time, and we're a very competitive culture. We make analogies all the time to sports. We're like, you're like just about them winning and the competition around it. So we welcome competition. We love it, and just like I said, nothing feels better than proving people wrong. Nothing feels better than beating competition that didn't think that you were good enough to beat them. So that's always a big motivator for us.
So Wyc, again, on the Moneyball panel earlier, Jackie McMullen said that she thinks Derek White is the key to the Celtics winning a championship this year, and there was discussion about that. What are your feelings on that? There was an article in 538 about his high.
He's unbelievably important to the team, and but the first person, I'd rather not call out any particular guy, but I would add a person to the list, which is who is Malcolm Brogdon. And I have said, internally that if we had Malcolm last year in the finals, we might have won the finals. Would be my gut. But I could probably say that I could add everybody or lots of people to the list. I love this roster. They're very connected as a team, so they build off one another. But Derek and Malcolm have such poise and presence, and organize things and play D when you don't necessarily expect it. Malcolm's like leading the NBA in three-point percentage, still doesn't crack a smile. Off the court, he smiles all the time, but he's just got this game face. Anyway, I love them both, and they're big pieces of the puzzle. They're not the stars, but they're the glue.
All right, that's awesome to hear. From both the perspective of a sports team and a sports gambling company, what is your take on the role digital collectibles, NFTs, will play in future growth for your organizations?
I don't honestly know. I'm hoping that we can use the NFT concept to let people, remember the games. I think people want to go and see history being made, and they were there. And so anything we can do to sort of say, here's a video clip from it, here's your experience, here's a unique memento from the game. I mean, so that the memories become more tangible in digital form. That's all good with me. I mean, I think it instead of changing things, it just enhances the stuff that we're, as Jason said with betting. I think it can enhance the connection we already feel.
So we are at time. This was a very fun conversation. Thank you very much. So I have a few takeaways from this that I'll just share back out. So first, the starting one is the importance of team. You guys both spoke so eloquently about that. the decisions that you've made to go for it were very personal. They're things that you believed in and were connected to, and you had to fight hard for them. Jason, I loved your perspective on when you were talking about the protections and why had the integrity of gambling, the regulations that are needed in the illegal market. I think sometimes can be a negative, way that gambling is viewed. Wyc, the global nature of sports, and not that you necessarily think it's going to be the case, but the higher potential of doubling the value of teams. Yeah. And then lastly, and I think we should all take what Wyc said to heart, find your banner and your championship. So thank you, Wyc and Jason. Appreciate it so much. Thanks, Jess.